recording.
Great. Thanks for being here, everybody. Students, thanks for joining us. This is the Pathway presentation, and we're going to be focusing on the capstone senior design experience, which you're all going to need to do. So this would be a great session to ask questions of the faculty presenter today, who is Professor James McDonald. Please be active. You're all going to do it. So putting some questions in chat would be great throughout this presentation. And Professor McDonald, thanks for being here and giving us your time today. And go right ahead. Thanks.
All right. Thank you for the intro. I think I noticed a few names that are in my Circuits 3 class, 335 in the audience as well. So I'm glad you guys take advantage of this. So what is senior design? And by the way, Bob, feel free if questions come up in the chat while I'm speaking, just, find the right moment and go ahead and slide them in there and I'll answer them in real time. Okay.
Will do. Thanks.
Okay. So senior design consists of two courses, as you probably know, 488 and 489. These courses are kind of the culmination of your years at ASU in the EE program. And they're very different from most EE courses. And I think that sometimes people that aren't sure what to expect, they're quite different. And I'll talk a little bit about how they are different from your standard courses. Most courses, you're talking about a specific technical expertise that you're learning, if it's Circuits 3 or electromagnetics or whatever it might be. And you study these principles, you do homework, you take quizzes, you have major exams that are usually a large part of your grade, right? And you also typically have one instructor that you answer to. So that's how most of your courses have probably gone. In this particular course, you're going to need to apply principles from many of those classes. So those classes are going to form that foundation, right? But you're going to use that foundation to work on a particular project. You're going to learn a lot about skills, soft engineering skills, and soft skills in general. I'll talk about that, that you typically don't even talk about necessarily in most of your classes. Manufacturability of your project, how your project affects the environment. So again, there's a lot of things that come up that you have to think about and write about and present that you typically haven't talked about in your other classes. You're going to work in teams, and it's an open-ended project where even the project definition and the goals may evolve over time. We talk about defining an initial scope, but that scope can change. It's not, carved in stone or in wood or whatever you want to say. It can change throughout and often will change depending on how things go. But the main thing is you're working in teams. And I think that's great because that's really tied into what you're going to be doing in industry. Most of you, if you get a job in industry, you are going to be working in teams, okay? And you will, I use the word answer, maybe that's not the best, but you will report into and give updates to a mentor, most likely a technical mentor, who could be in the EE program as a faculty member or even an industry mentor. But also then there are requirements of you from myself. I'm the course coordinator for the fall, spring sequence, if you will. I should mention that briefly. There are two sequences. Those of you that start in the fall in 488, and then you'll do this in the spring 489, you'll be with me. And as far as I know, if you were to start in January, they just kicked off 488. That's the spring fall sequence. You would be with Dr. Lee Harton. So those are the two course coordinators for these classes. And you will definitely write reports and make oral presentations, primarily instead of taking tests. The first semester, there will be a quiz on the class material, but in general, a bulk of your grade is through these reports and presentations. So as I mentioned, it is a 2-semester course for senior electrical engineering students. One of the things that's extremely important for you to understand, and I know Bob, Mr. Monahan always wants me to make sure I explain this, you have to enroll in 489 after 488, and it has to be continuous. In other words, one semester is 488, the very next main semester, not the summer, would be 489, okay? Because you're going to be working with those same teams on that same project. So if you enroll in 488 and you don't enroll in 489 the very next semester, you're going to have to start over with a new team on a new project in 488. So make sure you're planning out taking those 2 classes one semester after the other sequentially. Okay. Bob, again, if there's questions, just let me know. Feel free to ask questions. So just to give you an idea of the differences between 488 and 489, again, it's a continuous class, but in 488, you're going to form teams, and I'll talk more about that. That team forming process I like to call controlled chaos, because it is a little bit of controlled chaos. Part of it is we want to give a lot of flexibility on how you form your teams and the projects you work on. And the more flexibility you have, it becomes a little bit more chaotic. If I were to just assign you to a team and a project, that would be straightforward and easy, but you might not be so happy, okay? So we form the teams. Included in that, you have to find a project and a mentor, and we'll usually take the first 3 weeks to do those first 2 bulleted items, okay? So don't get worried that on day 1, you don't have a project or a team. That's okay, you got some time. Then you'll go into the planning and research and design phase of the project, and you'll document. Throughout this whole, both courses, you're going to be providing written reports. Go ahead. Did someone have a question? No? Okay. You're going to be providing written reports and going to TA conferences and actually doing some videos together as a team. And again, most of these are all team-based, and a majority of the grade will be a team grade. Okay. And you'll talk about, you know, who are my customers? Who's my immediate customer? Who's my final customer? How does my project have impacts on different things like the environment or a particular segment of the population, et cetera, et cetera. We also have added a proof of concept. And what that is it's not a prototype. It's basically you identifying the major risk in your project that you know of at this point and building something or putting something together that gives you confidence that that risk area won't cause your project to fail. And the reason this is important to do in the first semester is we don't want this high risk item hanging out there in the wind. And then you get to the second semester and you find out, oh my, this is not going to work. So we want you to mitigate that risk by putting together a proof of concept. Now, it might be integrated into your project in the second semester, or it might just be something very tiny that you needed to put together, a little widget, if you will, to just verify that you can do what your project needs you to do. Maybe it's a communication link that's risky and you want to test that out. So that's something that you'll do in this first semester. And then lastly, these lectures are twice a week for 50 minutes. And I do include guest lecturers, and maybe this is a good time to mention this, but class time is really reserved for a couple things. One is we talk about information that's important for your project and your project assignments, okay? And then we also bring in guest lecturers. They can be typically from industry that will talk to you about a particular industry, about a particular subject matter. Many of these companies, and I'm trying to work it out between first and second semester to get more of the guest lecturers in the first semester to be companies that actually hire from ASU, that hire ASU graduates. And this will give you an opportunity to get to know their company and develop a contact there. And who knows, potentially, get an internship if you're going to, to grad school, or get a job with one of these companies. So we do bring in guest lecturers as well. So in 489, you continue your project with that team, and you basically build it out. You build, if you want to call it a prototype, you can call it a prototype, because typically we're not going to manufacturing with this in high volume production, but you build it out, you test it, right? You evaluate it, and you should have an evaluation plan and determine basically, does your build out perform the way you expect it? And you might have time to do an iteration or two to make improvements. That will depend. If not, part of your write-up could be, how could you improve this going forward? You'll document final report is a pretty big deal in 489. And probably the I don't know if you want to call it the climax or the highlight is typically the very last day of the semester. You will be in a showcase or a demonstration day, if you will. And that's where faculty, industry, public, people can show up, and you will present your project. You'll have a nice poster, and you'll have people coming up to your table asking you about your project. And we even have some prize for what's considered to be the top project of the course. And we have secret judges that go around and evaluate the finalists. So it's a pretty big deal, I would say. And then as far as the lectures go, these are only one time a week. Typically it's on Friday. Has been on Friday. I don't know if anyone knows differently, but it's usually always on Friday, and it's a 75-minute class.
Yeah,
So
we expect Friday. And then Professor McDonald, we did have a couple of questions on team formation. I know that's coming in a future slide, so I can hold those, or if you want me to read those out, I can do that now.
why don't you read them to me, and then I'll make sure I hit them just in case.
Got it. So Drake is asking about how many members on a team.
Okay, if that's what they're like, you're right. Let me go ahead and continue. And if I don't answer your question, type in the chat again and make sure I do, okay?
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and that goes for the other questions too. So we'll probably get these throughout, and we'll save a few minutes at the end. So thanks. Keep them coming though. We'll get to them.
Yeah. Okay. Speak of the topic. So I look at this as the major components of the senior design. It's student team, your mentor, obviously your project, and the resources you have available to you. So let's start with that student team. Okay. So teams consist of 3, 4, or 5 members. So you need a minimum of 3, but you cannot have more than 5. And there's enough flexibility there. So please don't say, oh, we only have 2, or I want to have 6. 3 to 5 is good. I mean, too many members and you got, if you will, too many cooks in the kitchen, and too few, and you just can't make the progress you would want to make. Okay. Students form their own teams by connecting with each other. So one of the things in this class is we combine the on-campus and online students, and I'll talk why we do that. But these will be combined, and a matter of fact, we're going to encourage what we call hybrid teams, and I'll talk about that in a second. So these hybrid teams, a combination of both on-campus and online. In fact, we encourage that, and I actually give a bonus half a point or a point for hybrid teams, because when you're working in industry now, particularly post-COVID, a lot of the work you're doing is in teams that are geographically distributed, meaning there's people you're working with in Maine and California and sometimes offshore, okay? And so this is a way to help build an understanding of what it takes to work with these geographically distributed teams. So hybrid teams are actually encouraged, and it helps the online team to have someone here on campus that is present. It helps with the showcase. So we do encourage hybrid teams. Again, it's not a requirement, it's encouraged. We use Slack to help facilitate team formation. And again, between the two on-campus and online sections, there's almost like this time, the fall spring semester is quite large, 240 students in the fall spring. So imagine 240 students. We have, I think, 51 teams, so of 3 to 5 members. So it's a lot trying to get everyone set up and get on a team, okay? And I'll talk about how those teams are formed in a second, okay? But you know, again, you can use Slack initially in the very beginning to start looking at team members. And again, I'll talk about projects and how to go about this. And so team formation will be completed within the first month of the semester. I like to target 3 weeks. And you know, I would encourage that, no, you don't have to have a team on day 1, but if you're within 10 days and you don't have any idea or any thoughts on what team you're going to be on, that's when I would start to ramp up the focus to get on a team and have a project. Okay. Let's see. And again, these will be the people you're working with through 488 and 489. So the course comprises teams as well as individual assignments. Most of the grade, large percentage of the grade is going to be a team grade. So everyone gets the same grade. However, there are situations, particularly on reports, that would be typical. But there are situations when you're presenting that will have a percentage that's the team, and then each individual would get like 20% of that would be an individual grade. And also the mentors, who comprise a large portion of your grade, they have a choice. If they feel there is a big distinction between people contributing and not contributing and etc., they might choose to grade the team individually and give each individual person on that team a separate grade. Or they might say everyone on the team contributed very well, about the same, everyone gets an A, or whatever it might be, right? So the mentor has that flexibility. I already covered that. And also at the end of the semester, we do an intra-team evaluation, meaning everyone on your team, if you're person A, everyone on your team will give an evaluation of you as terms of your contribution, your working together, various criteria. And they will give you kind of a grade in each category. And then at the very end, they will provide a ranking of where you fit as, you know, basically a ranking of the whole team. Is where they fit and all of their team members. In industry, this is often called a rank and rate. And this is actually done with some tech companies, quite a few as a matter of fact, where you get rated on how you do, and then you also get ranked within your team. And that kind of forces people to make some choices. Now, this is not going to be a huge contribution, okay? This is not 10% of your grade or even 5% of your grade. But if you're on the borderline between 2 grade levels and you have great ratings and you're ranked at the top 2 or 2 out of 5 by most people, then that probably would push you up to the next higher grade, right? So this is just a gentle push, based on the assessment here. Okay. So student teams, I think I still have some things that we'll answer. Bob, do we have any? We're going to just hold the questions, I think you said. Okay, I'm going to assume that. So let's talk about a mentor.
Yeah,
Each
sorry, I
team,
just couldn't find my button there. So yeah,
that's
there's a
okay.
couple, but they're ones best that held to the end.
Okay, so each team is going to have a mentor. It can be an EE faculty member or someone from industry. I'm biased. I mean, I know there's much more faculty members, but if we have industry projects with industry mentors, I think that's awesome, because if you guys are graduating and going off to industry, what a nice opportunity, right? So some project mentors have their own project ideas. So what I try to do is during the summer, late part of the summer, typically, because most of the time I don't get responses until then, A faculty member will say, hey, I have a project. It's, translating text to Braille. And I'd be the mentor of that project. And can you put me down? And I will list those projects with the mentor on Canvas. Okay. So when you get into Canvas for the very first time, if you go to these, you might see some projects already there where you can sign up for those projects. You can become a member of those teams. Now, again, I don't control when those come in. I know people would love me to have, 40 projects lined up on Canvas. Unfortunately, I have to wait for people to provide me those. So that's one way. Sometimes the mentor says, you know what, I want to mentor a team or two, but I want them to come up with their own project. I find that they come up with their own project, they're more excited and more energized and more interested. So sometimes I'll have a section that just says mentors willing to support a project that the team comes up with. Okay. So those are different ways that the mentor helps support these projects. Okay, but in either case, the mentor is going to supply a big chunk of your course grade. Currently, it's 50% of your grade comes from that mentor. So if you never show up to meetings, if you never participate in those meetings, the mentor is going to, be challenged to find out, to know how you're really contributing to that team. If you have action items that are assigned and you don't get them done, and the mentor asks you, and it's like you haven't done anything, again, that's probably not presenting you in the best light to a person that's going to provide a large portion of your grade. So each group's got to find their own mentor. So if you choose a project on Canvas that has a mentor, awesome, okay? But if you have a project and you have a team, you have to go find your own mentor. And what I would suggest is, first of all, you can look on Canvas and see if there's a member who's saying, hey, I'll mentor. I want to do I'll mentor whatever project the team comes up with. But you can also go to this link and it shows you what faculty members are focused on. So if you have a project that's focused on solar cells or generating power or whatever, find a faculty member who's interested in that area, okay? And go talk to them. And there's a good chance they're incentivized to be mentors. So there's a very good chance they will say yes, or they will point you to someone in their department that they know would be interested. Okay. So that's one of the ways to find an alternative way to find a mentor if you already have a project and a team. And as I said, I will list contacts and projects for students. Most industry-based mentors will come from a Canvas listing. Okay, I already talked about this. However, I want you to be very clear about the mentor. The mentor is not your boss, okay? You're in charge of your project and you're responsible for the success, okay? They're to basically keep you on the track. I won't read all of this, but help you with some technical aspects, perhaps, point you in the direction of necessary resources, whether that's subject matter experts or actually resources to build your project. Of course, I can help with that as well. So let's see. Yeah, and then the other thing is to kind of help you break this project that's for 2 semesters, kind of break it up into milestones and help you plan it out a little bit, and break it into bite-sized chunks, right? We're not trying to eat the whole elephant at once, okay? Take little bites, and they'll help you with that process. You'll set up a project schedule, and you'll define a budget and resources and et cetera, and they'll help you with that process, and I will as well. Okay, projects. I want to make sure I know we're probably running out of time here. So sources of projects. You come up with your own projects, faculty and research staff comes up with projects, or industry partners come up with projects. So again, regardless of the origin of the project, you're responsible, you take full ownership and responsible for its success or its failure. And all I can tell you is please find a project that you're interested in, because 2 semesters is a long time to be on something that you have no interest in at all, okay? So you have a choice here, unlike your other classes that might be required that you're not very interested in. You have a choice here. Find a project that interests you, okay? And the project, should cover multiple areas of the EE coursework that laid your foundation up to this point, whether it be power, circuits, electromagnetics, communications, programming, etc. I wouldn't focus too much on this. I think naturally the project itself will cover multiple areas. It should be open-ended. It shouldn't be a problem like 2 + 2. What is 2 + 2? It's 4, right? No, it should be an open-ended project to meet some need or want of the identified customers. And it should be appropriate for a group of, as we said, 3 to 5 people, 2 semesters, and constrained resources. Each team is going to have a $200 budget to work with, which is twice what it used to be. And so, you are constrained on resources, so you have to consider that. So consider the time, consider the money, and the size of your group. Okay, speaking of resources, last section, you should design from the ground up with off-the-shelf components or subsystems. You can get access to components, development kits, little or no cost through the school or manufacturers. ASU provides provided or free software to design or manage your project, like Microsoft Project, for example. We have 3D printers. I'll have a list of all the different places that you can go where you have resources. And we actually have our own design lab, senior design lab in the Goldwater Center that's in 297, GWC 297, that you should definitely take advantage of, particularly in the second semester as you build your project. And as I mentioned, $200 per team. And sometimes faculty and industry mentors provide additional funding. For example, we have CIA-based projects, at least we have up to this semester. I don't know if that will change. But they provide like $2,000 a team, I believe. So industry and even faculty can provide some additional funding. And you also can actually provide, it's a little more work, but if you need additional funding, you can provide an application and a write-up that I review, and then I send to the finance and they look at it, and you might be available for some additional funds. So, don't get worked up. If your project's $250 and you say, oh, it's 200, I can't do the project. No, don't do that. Hopefully we'll work through that type of thing, okay? So, lastly, and I'll try to wrap it up here, is communication, problem solving, working in teams, project teams at multiple sites, and being aware of the business context. These are all the things that are going to be required by employers, okay? I mean, I forget the source of this, but I know personally, having run a company, I know how important these are, and often some of these limit people's ability to advance in a company. And these are all the things that we really focus on in senior design and hopefully help you develop, okay? And I'm going to wrap this up pretty quick, but we are going to, we do focus on the ABIT criteria. It is an accreditation. It is a course where we have to submit criteria to make sure that we're abiding by the accreditation guidelines, if you will. And so these outcomes are all part of that. The one thing I want to point out is you are going to consider things like public health, safety, cultural impact, social, environmental, economic factors. These are all going to be stressed throughout the course that you probably didn't focus on a lot in your other coursework. So, and again, you will work on a team. Hopefully you have a team that functions well. If you don't, we have a process and a process you go through. I'm struggling here with words. I'm getting old. An escalation process that you can go through so that if you have team members where your team members are struggling or whatever, we can help to hopefully resolve those issues. Okay, so we're running short on time. Remember, you're all entrepreneurs. You should have a sense of curiosity, connections, creating value for others from arising opportunities. And we do have a showcase day set up on May 2nd, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Please, please, please feel free to stop by. You can stop by for 10 minutes and see what it's like. People that have stopped by, they're like, oh, this is different than what I had in my mind. So stop by and see what it's all about. And you'll see some pretty cool projects as well. So that's all I have.
Yeah, thanks. Do you have a minute for a couple of questions?
I have plenty of time.
Great, great. So uh, Christopher had a good question about prototyping with teams that have remote folks. So online students, how are they expected to get materials and work across state lines? And we have great experience with that, but do you have any comments?
Yeah, so much like the other teams that would be hybrids or online or not online, you will place an order, and there's forms and everything to order your materials, okay? And and then rather than you picking them up in the office, they will work with you and you will identify where you want those materials shipped, typically to one of the team members' homes. And you will have the materials arrive there and you can build your prototypes that way. Similarly, if there's services required, we'll work with you on that. But yeah, it's a little more difficult in the sense that if you're building something and you have 5 members of your team and each build is a couple $100, well, we're probably not going to build 5 of them for $1,000, right? So I know people that they'll each be responsible for doing something on the build, and they'll have materials shipped to them. They'll build their portion and then they'll ship it to another team member, and that team member will work on it from their perspective. So we do accommodate that, and you will be able to get your materials and be able to build things. The services obviously might be a little more challenging. You might have to go out and find someone outside of ASU to provide a service for you.
Thanks. Yeah,
But,
we're real
but
familiar with that.
what's that?
Yeah, that's a familiar thing. That works well. So thanks for asking that, Christopher. There's a question about lists of industry-sponsored projects, and that's generally given through the class when you register in the first class, correct?
Yeah, when you get on Canvas, I hope to have industry projects listed. And when I say industry, I'm also including government. Okay, but both. Again, they've ebbed and flowed. Sometimes I've had 5 to 10, or up to 10, and other times I've only had 3 or 4. So they kind of ebb and flow. I like trying to get industry projects, but they will be listed on Canvas. So as soon as you get onto Canvas, you can check that out. I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Yeah, and to the online students in the room, thanks for joining us. But we will send a link to you for the capstone day in May, where you can view some of the projects that are being presented online too. So you can participate in that just like the Tempe students can. Another quick question was, this was kind of answered, but Patrick is asking, how do we gauge how far to take a project? Is having hardware and code with a simple interface sufficient? How can we gauge when to stop developing? That's a mentor and faculty and TAs help you gauge that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so what we will call that is we will call that scope. And in the very beginning, once you have your mentor, your team, and your project, you will work collectively. And ideally, your team would drive more of this, but obviously your mentor would likely have much more experience. So if you set up a scope and your mentor's like, yeah, we couldn't do that with 3 students in 2 years, let alone 8 months, then the mentor will pull you back and reduce that scope. But you will have a period of time in the beginning of 488 to do what we call scope. So scoping, budgeting, and putting together a project plan. You will do that in the very beginning, and you'll learn something in that process, and you might find out you have this scope, but when you put the project plan together, it's like, yeah, this is too much. And then you'll pull back on that scope and say, okay, what makes sense and where can we pull back? So I don't have an answer for you, but directly, because it's very project specific, but you will define that scope. And very seldom do I have, worry about, you're sandbagging and the scope is too small and you're not doing enough. More likely, people put together projects that are probably overextending and they need to rein that scope in. And you can work with your mentor and define that.
Okay, and then two other quick ones if you are okay with that. And there's Andrew's asking about honors thesis, which might be different. So the honors, when you work with Barrett students, what are your when they do it for honors credit for the course or using it in their thesis process? Do you have any comments on that?
Yes, so I'm going to hit two things here: power, emphasis, and honors. So honors contracts, you have to make sure that your mentor is willing to support an honors contract, okay? And then if your mentor says yes, then what you have to do is you have to work with your mentor to define something in addition to what the main project is. So it has to be above and beyond the main project that you would do as part of that honors contract. And they would be your advisor. Please do not list me as your advisor. I put this down on Canvas in red letters. I'm not your advisor. I got 51 projects. The mentor is the perfect advisor for that. But you have to make sure, if you really want to have this as your honors contract, you need to make sure your mentor will support that. Many mentors will, some mentors won't. Kind of depends on their, just it depends on several things. But anyhow, that's so yes, you can do it, but you can do it if your mentor allows it and they can define something above and beyond the baseline project. I guess I would call that an addition of this to the scope that the rest of the team is working to. Okay, the
Great.
other thing that wasn't asked is power. If you have a power focus, you need to have a project that has some element of power focus to it. Some projects are obvious, okay, but some projects aren't. In general, if they're supported by a professor in the power arena, then it's usually accepted and that's considered a power project. Those that are not being run by someone in that area of focus, we go to the chair of the power department and you would send an email and say, I believe this has power focus. Here's what I'm going to be working on as part of this project. Is that sufficient enough to meet that criteria? And if they hopefully, reply back affirmatively, and then you have that email as reference that your project qualifies. Okay. I think that's pretty, from my end, that's accurate. I don't know if Mr. Monahan, if you need to add something else.
No, yeah, it's individual. And then Penelope is also asking, we kind of touched on this, but she's taking not taking 48 until January. Is there somewhere, when will government related projects be posted? And in general, they're not posted until the class begins, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no posting mechanism. I will say that the fall class or the class that starts in the spring is typically about half the size. I don't know how many teams they have this year, but we have 51, and I think they typically have 25, 28.
That's right. Yeah, it's about 50%. So that's great. And then there was a hand that went up from Christopher. If Christopher, if you don't mind using chat, that might be easier. I don't think we have um, but if not, that's great. So appreciate your time. Sorry, I got a little tripped up on my words there. I did it too. So that was great. We're a little bit over time, so maybe we'll wrap it up, but we appreciate you being here, and students, thanks for asking questions today. It's a big deal for you to do it. And it's a great experience, and it's hopefully a very memorable part of your degree. So I think, yeah, unless you have other words, Professor McDonald, we appreciate your time.
No, stop by the showcase on Friday, May 2nd. And I hope to see some of you in my classroom in I guess it would be fall of 2025.
Yeah, yeah, and on that too, just to remind online students, we will send a link in the days before the May 2nd capstone presentation where you can join online teams in their Zoom sessions, and we often have monitors in the room. So it's a great way to engage with live with students if you're available at that time. So thanks everybody for your time, and we appreciate you being here. Thanks, Ellen. You're getting some thank yous in the chat here, Professor McDonald. So thanks for your time.
All right, thank you guys. Appreciate you guys attending.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.